Today, we're getting into something pretty fundamental. This relationship, often a tricky one, between faith and reality.
Hmm.
How do we actually live our, concrete, practical lives while also dealing with this invisible, sort of intangible realm of faith?
It's a classic human dilemma, really.
Yeah, and our source today is a really thought-provoking sermon by Reverend Sun Myung Moon. We're going to try and pull out the key insights here on finding happiness, purpose, connection, especially when things feel unclear. We want to understand this specific view.
Right. And what's fascinating is how universal that search for happiness is,
Yeah.
whether it's through intellectual stuff, material things, or something deeper, more spiritual.
Hmm.
This sermon, though, it really challenges how we usually think about stimulus and satisfaction. It draws a line, a pretty sharp one, between what makes us happy temporarily in the physical world and what really sustains a life of faith.
Different criteria for different realities, but connected somehow.
Exactly. Intertwined, but distinct.
And that's right where the sermon kicks off, isn't it? Saying faith deals with an invisible God, which is, well, totally unlike our tangible world,
Stark contrast.
which immediately throws up a challenge. How do you apply different standards? Because, let's face it, in daily life, happiness often comes from what the sermon calls an objective stimulus.
Yeah, like another person or buying something new or hitting a goal at work.
Right. We need that feedback, that sense of progress. So here's the interesting part. How does that work for faith? When, like this sermon points out, there doesn't seem to be any hard evidence, no scientific method to, validate it.
How do you perceive that invisible stimulus? How do you react?
Exactly.
Well, that's the core problem the sermon gets at. It calls it a problem of cognition, basically, a question of knowledge.
Okay.
How do we actually connect the dots between the life of faith, which can feel abstract, and our everyday life through what we know and understand?
And just looking around isn't enough.
Apparently not for this specific kind of stimulus. The sermon suggests a particular method. We need to really observe and study these central figures in God's providence, starting way back with Adam.
So God's providence, that's like God's plan unfolding through history, using certain people.
That's the idea. God's guidance. His active hand in events through key individuals.
Right.
By looking at their goals, their motivations, figures like Noah, Abraham, Moses, John the Baptist, saints, sages, we start to get a standard for ourselves. It helps bridge that cognitive gap between what we see and what we believe.
So these historical figures become like spiritual case studies.
In a way, yes. Blueprints, maybe.
The sermon really leans into this, presenting these great men as examples of navigating that faith versus reality tension. It stresses that they started their faith journey focused on God, not themselves, not driven by, personal comfort or desire.
Right, it was about a higher purpose they perceived.
But that choice led straight into conflict, constant conflict, it says, between their faith and their reality.
Imagine that.
Yeah, think about the cost. Loneliness, rejection by their own people, often living with very little materially. They had to kind of narrow their whole mindset to be centered on God.
That sounds incredibly tough.
Doesn't it?
It really does.
Okay.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture the sermon paints, these people basically plunged themselves into a relationship with God, often because, well, they had no one else.
So the isolation was almost a prerequisite.
In many cases, yes. They couldn't find that object of happiness in their immediate surroundings. So this pushed them into this intense, focused relationship with the divine, and paradoxically, that became their source of real contentment.
Okay, give us some examples. The sermon mentions specific people.
It does. Vivid ones. Take Noah. He spends 120 years being persecuted while building that ark.
120 years.
And it wasn't just outsiders. His own family, the sermon suggests, treated him like he was crazy, maybe even wished him dead sometimes. Yet he kept this great confidence, great faith in God. He even sacrificed himself. The ones persecuting him carried all that difficulty.
Incredible resilience. What about Moses?
Moses leaves the comfort of Pharaoh's palace, tries to help his people,
Right.
and they persecute him, kick him out into the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years where he just longed for God, loved God, and held onto that resolution to save his people. That intense devotion, forged in isolation, is why God chose him.
So again, isolation leading to deeper connection.
Seems to be a pattern. And then John the Baptist, the sermon pictures him living this really austere life out in the wilderness.
Like a hippie, it says, eating locusts and wild honey.
Yeah, totally detached from family, home, material things. His whole focus was on the Messiah's coming. Always thinking, how can I open a new door for that. Not worried about detours around worldly stuff.
Okay, so the common thread here.
The thread is how they took these really difficult, narrow positions, the suffering, the isolation, the lack of normal validation, and transformed them
Into what?
into new, profound relationships with God. They found true happiness and greater contentment there. It mentions St. Francis finding joy in pure poverty, that kind of spiritual detachment opening him up completely.
So these figures set a very high bar for faith under pressure, but then the sermon shifts, right? It challenges us today.
It really does. Takes it a step further.
It says flat out that as fallen people, we have no automatic relationship with God. And fallen people, that's the theological idea of humanity being separated from God since Adam, right? We need to bridge that gap actively.
Exactly. It's not automatic. We have to endeavor to reach a certain minimum standard.
It uses that analogy of a university professor.
Right. You want to learn from this great mind. You can't just show up. You have to meet the requirements. You must register for his course.
Makes sense. So that initial conscious step is crucial.
Very. And then it asks us to look at ourselves. God's standard is eternal and unchanging. Absolute. But what about our determination, our inspiration?
Does it last?
Well, the sermon observes that our human determination will change. Maybe even, 100 times a day. We fluctuate.
So how do we deal with that? Our changeability versus God's unchangeability.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do we reconcile those? The sermon defines truth itself as eternal, something beyond death, beyond changeability.
Okay.
So to become a true person, to really embody that truth, you have to overcome that changeability, become unchangeable yourself.
Yes.
It's not literal death in life, but shedding that temporary, fluctuating self.
Like spiritual death.
Kind of. And embracing something lasting, unchangeable, like refining ore into pure metal. It suggests this often happens, this moment of truth, during really intense times.
Life and death situations. Confrontation, challenge.
Yes. In those pressure cookers, the unchanging elements will overcome changing elements. The fluff burns away, leaving only what's real, what's constant. That's how you forge that true connection.
That's a powerful idea, truth forged in crisis. And it gets even more intense when the sermon talks about the last days. And it's not just some far-off apocalypse. It's described as a radical transformation happening right now, a time of chaos, trouble, where people feel hopeless.
Despair, it says.
Yeah. And in all this, God is actively looking for unchanging children. People whose faith is so solid, they think, even if the whole world falls apart, we won't.
Unshakable faith.
But here's where it gets really interesting. God doesn't just want us to copy those past figures. The sermon says God wants you to be superior to those men of the past.
Wow, superior. Even to Noah, Moses.
Yes, because even they failed to fulfill God's entire hope for them. That's a huge statement. What does that imply about our role now? Are we meant to finish something they started?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It suggests their missions, while foundational, maybe weren't the complete picture, or they operated in a different phase of God's plan.
So our task is different. Bigger, even.
The expectation seems higher, yes. Not just to be steadfast like them, but to go further. To actively build this new era. The sermon even talks about God's methods. Sometimes allowing intense suffering briefly to help you quickly pass the test.
That sounds harsh.
It can seem paradoxical. Or appearing to lead you into death like inspiring martyrdom in the past. It's all about finding those unchanging children in these changing situations. God isn't looking for passive followers anymore.
He wants bold people.
Bold people, it says, who will automatically come out to awaken existing churches to this new reality where faith is active, not passive.
Okay, so what's the key directive for us listening right now?
This is crucial. In this age, God expects us to do things by ourselves. Good children, it says, recover what's lost and return it to God without asking for his help.
Without asking. That's counterintuitive.
It is. It says by doing this, we've liberated God. Freed him up, in a sense. The ideal attitude isn't God help me. It's facing suffering and saying, Father, help the whole world.
Focus outward, not inward.
Exactly. That selflessness, prioritizing the bigger picture, makes you the center, the heir, the object to God. Someone he can truly work through directly.
That completely reframes responsibility. It's not about waiting for instructions. It's about acting as God's agent.
Precisely. Taking the initiative.
So how do we actually do that? How do we internalize that huge responsibility day to day?
The sermon suggests a shift in perspective. Like when you walk along the street, why don't you take God's point of view?
See things as God might see them.
Yeah. Notice the things that need changing, the evil, Notice the good things you could multiply for everyone. And then the crucial step, if nobody else does it, think in your own mind, I will do it.
Take personal ownership.
Yes. And the promise attached is pretty amazing. If you maintain that attitude, angels and saints will come and help you, even if you never ask for help from God.
Wow. Divine help comes when you're already acting.
You become a magnet for it, a focal point.
Okay, so where does this all lead? What's the ultimate vision here?
It culminates in this vision of the age of the four-dimensional world appearing, a time when the realm of faith and the world of reality will unite.
Four-dimensional. Not like physics, but spiritually.
Right, a spiritual concept where the invisible and the visible merge. Our spiritual actions have direct, real-world impact, and what's really key here is that this isn't just some abstract ideal way off in the future. The sermon insists that unlike past ideologies that just ended up as ideas, our belief system will bear fruit in actual reality.
So faith becomes tangible. Real results.
Exactly. It flips the script.
Yeah.
The life of faith, once seen as unreal, is actually the eternal and substantial one. And our everyday world, while vivid, is ephemeral and inconstant.
Meaning faith can be reality right now.
Yes, far beyond the world and far beyond the standard of past faith. It's
Yeah.
about full integration. Our spiritual wins are real wins, changing the world around us.
So if we unpack all that, what it means for you listening today is this massive shift. Faith isn't separate from life. It's potentially the most real, most constant part of it. It's a call to become an active agent of change, holding an unchanging standard, especially now. Viewing the world from God's perspective, seeing what needs fixing, and stepping up with a boldness that, according to this sermon, should even surpass those giants of the past.
Which leads us to a final, pretty challenging question for you to think about. Given that the sermon says your spiritual accomplishments are your own now, and that God expects you to act independently to create a new world,
Okay.
what specific evil things in your own world, looking from God's point of view, are you prepared to take action on and reform? Even if, like Noah, it means you might have to stand entirely alone.